Hey you, the big guy with the gun that's intended to be mounted to the side of an attack helicopter. You may not have time to bleed, but do you have time to watch a video ranking every single video game based on the Alien and Predator franchises from worst to best? Thought so? Strap yourself in then. This is going to be a long and bumpy ride.
The Predator and Alien franchises have walked hand in hand almost since their inception. The first time the Xenomorph and the Jungle Hunter officially crossed paths was in a 1989 comic published by Dark Horse, but the iconic early movies in each franchise had won the hearts and minds of sci-fi, horror and action fans ever since legendary director Ridley Scott unleashed Alien in 1979 and Die Hard's John McTiernan dropped the original Predator in 1987.
It was only natural that numerous video game adaptations would follow, and it felt right to assemble every last one of them and arrange them by quality for your viewing pleasure. We're including mobile-only games, but are omitting card games, browser games, pachinko machines, and non-interactive VR experiences. Each game will be judged on its critical and commercial reception, its impact at the time of release, and its ability to capture the feel and themes of the movies on which it's based. And yes, we're well aware of the reputation of games based on these licenses, but there may be more gems on here than you'd expect, so stick around, okay?
Right, that's enough preamble. They ain't paying us by the hour, after all. Prepare your M41A pulse rifle with over and under 30mm pump-action grenade launcher and join us on an express elevator to hell as we cast our trained critical eye over every single Alien and Predator game to have ever emerged from the dark void of space. And don't you even try to scream. After all, no one can hear you out here.
Let's rank 'em. I'm Gunnery Sergeant Ben.
And I'm Detective Lieutenant Peter from Gaming Ranked, and here is every Alien and Predator video game, ranked from worst to best.
The Unrankables. There's only a couple of Unrankables to mention for this video. Up first, it's Predator VR, a playable Predator experience released in 2018 and published by Fox Next, a subsidiary of 20th Century Fox responsible for VR video games and amusement parks. In Predator VR, players don their headset and take on the role of a predator or an elite human soldier and fight for survival in a jungle environment. Why can't we just give it a ranking then? Well, Predator VR isn't available to just anyone, you know. It's available for commercial licensing only, locking out average Joes like you and me and blocking us from giving it a fair assessment. As such, based on the trailer and the snippets of footage out there, we're going to say it looks okay and carry on with our day. The second title is Alien Rogue Incursion, a VR game released for PSVR 2, MetaQuest 3, and Windows. It follows Zula Hendricks of Alien comics and novels fame as she fends off a, rogue incursion of aliens. Yes, the first part of a duology and set between the initial Alien movies, Rogue Incursion went down rather well with critics, scoring between 75 and 80% on Metacritic depending on the platform. Unfortunately, in this instance, the game released after this script had been completed, but we wanted to tip our cap to it nonetheless. And now, on with the ranking. Number 49, Aliens Colonial Marines, 2013. PC, PS3, and Xbox 360. Fans of the Alien franchise are used to convincing themselves certain things don't exist. Any movie made after Aliens, for example. Unfortunately, the outrageous missteps, miscommunications, and mistakes of 2013's Aliens Colonial Marines are so infamous that its abject failure stands as a symbol of disaster in gaming history. It may be more playable than some of the lower-end titles on our list, but in as far as achieving what it set out to accomplish as a video game, this sits at the very bottom of the Sulaco's hangar airlock, fit only to be jettisoned into space. Published by Sega and developed by Gearbox Software, it had all the ingredients to be great. Gearbox were coming off the back of the well-received Brothers in Arms series and the recent birth of the Borderlands franchise, and legendary sci-fi concept artist Sid Mead was on board, as well as original movie actors like Michael Biehn and Lance Henriksen. How could it possibly fail? Well, an extremely complicated and problematic development didn't help. Gearbox repeatedly outsourced development of the game thanks to their focus being on other projects, and Sega kept sticking their big blue oar in, making demands that the various developers didn't agree with, and none of the involved parties were happy with the situation. The result was a game that was a paltry shadow of the atmospheric sci-fi epic that was promised. Generic gameplay, bland visuals, a storyline that didn't fit with the source material, laughable AI that was somewhat rectified years later via the correcting of a spelling mistake in the code, immersion-breaking glitches, and poor collision detection were the tips of a problematic iceberg, and Aliens Colonial Marines missed the mark by such a wide margin that Sega and Gearbox were slapped with a lawsuit for false advertising. The whole thing was very messy and has become one of gaming's legendary disappointments. Unfortunately, it deserves the same fate as that clutch of eggs beneath the atmosphere processor on the LV-426. It's the only way to be sure. Number 48. Predators: The Great Hunt. 2010. Mobile. Hey look, it's one of those Predator chaps come all the way from your Utja Prime to star in this one-on-one fighting game that coincided with the launch of Nimrod Antal's 2010 series revival Predators. Developed and published by Game & Action Limited, Predators: The Great Hunt looks and plays almost exactly like the mobile title Alien vs. Predator, developed by Wicked Witch Software that released some years prior. Truth be told, it seems to straight up use the sprites from Wicked Witch Software's game, and hey, hang on a minute, doesn't that background look familiar? It's very reminiscent of Chrysalid's Arena from the King of Fighters 99. So reminiscent, in fact, that one would almost think they swiped said art from right under SNK's talented pixelated noses. After a little bit of detective work, it would also appear that this background is lifted from Kazuna Encounter, and who knows what other SNK titles have been pillaged of their assets for this unlicensed mobile game. So, Predators: The Great Hunt has plagiarism going against it, but what has it got going for it? Not a lot, to be frank. The gameplay requires players to input number commands and directional buttons. Yes, phones had buttons in those days, in order to unleash attacks and avoid incoming damage, but said controls can easily be manipulated, and random button mashers will often find themselves overcoming their opponents while taking no damage in return. The characters on offer include an alien, a warrior, where they either misspelled warrior or wario, honestly neither would surprise me at this point, and characters from the film like Nikolai and Hanzo. To be fair, these two are probably the coolest characters from the movie, but why would you try to wrestle with this when you could just be watching this? Honestly, Predators: The Great Hunt is a total rip-off and a bit of a joke. An amusing footnote in the history of a far greater franchise, and nothing more. Number 47. Aliens Unleashed. 2003. Mobile. Alright, now we've got a famous blunder and some unlicensed nonsense out of the way, let's see if we can find something with a bit more integrity. Aliens Unleashed, released way back in 2003, was the first game in either the Alien or Predator franchise to appear on mobile devices. Unlike Aliens Colonial Marines, you could argue that the developers, Sorrent, achieved what they intended with this one. The only problem is, thanks mainly to the embryonic state of mobile gaming at the time, Aliens Unleashed is barely interactive. The game puts players in the combat boots of a newly recruited United Systems Colonial Marine in New Quantico, a secret training facility located on a newly settled planet. This training facility is preparing Marines for close encounters with the various known xenomorph life forms and has created synths, synthetic aliens used for training purposes. We'll give you 3 guesses as to what happens next. If you guessed anything other than the synths going rogue and enacting actual murder on the hapless recruits, then you really don't watch much sci-fi. Either way, it's players' impromptu mission to take care of these malfunctioning simulations. Players interacted with these synths by selecting which one they'd like to fight from a list, then pressing the number that appears on screen. Press the correct number and get a hit in, mess up and lose health. The only other interactable aspect of the game is the inventory management, with players able to pick up gear after surviving battles. These include a selection of weapons available for use, and equipment like helmets and boots that increase the protagonist's armor. It's a big old QuickTime event with some inventory management then, and as such didn't really have much to offer at the time, let alone nowadays. We'll give it the nod over Colonial Marines, because it's about what you'd expect from a 2003 mobile game, but other than that, it has very little going for it. It doesn't even let you fight real aliens. Number 46. Alien vs. Predator. 2004. Mobile. The first game on our list that officially combines the two franchises, and confusingly, one of the two mobile games named Alien vs Predator to be released in the year 2004. This one was developed by Wicked Witch Software and is the game that Predator's The Great Hunt lifted some of its sprites from, stole some of its sprites from. Alien vs Predator is a one-on-one fighter that ran on Java, where you could play as an alien or a predator and use the phone's buttons to attempt to cause irreparable bodily harm to your opponent. The game is visually okay, but we here at Gaming Ranked would argue that it looks weird to see the ultimate killing machine of the known universe battling away with flimsy-looking kicks when its entire upper body and tail are lethal murder apparatuses. Just replace the kick with a tail swipe or something, yeah? That xenomorph stalking the corridors and cargo bays of the Nostromo would have been far less terrifying if it spent most of its time trying to kick Ripley in the shins, after all. Would have been funnier, though. The sprites look more or less as good as they could, considering the processing power. There's an eye-catching, bright green blood effect when someone lands a good hit. Luckily, both of the involved extraterrestrials have blood that's a lovely shade of toxic sludge. And the background art isn't stolen from SNK fighting games, which is a bonus. Look, the gameplay isn't up to much, but at least Alien vs Predator by Wicked Witch Software used its own assets, came out 6 years prior to its imitator, and offered a bit more interaction than Aliens Unleashed. That's why it's here at number 46, rather than languishing at number 47 or 48. Well done, Alien vs Predator by Wicked Witch Software. You did well, relatively. Number 45, Alien vs Predator, 2004, mobile. What's that? We've made a mistake and put the same obscure mobile game on here twice? No, silly, you clearly haven't been paying attention. Again, there were two games released for mobile games in 2004 called Alien vs Predator. The one we just spoke about was Alien vs Predator by Wicked Witch Software, and this one is Alien vs Predator by Superscape. Unlike Alien vs Predator by Wicked Witch Software, Alien vs Predator by Superscape is an action platformer. Taking place in the same mysterious buried temple found beneath the ice of Antarctica that the 2004 Alien vs Predator film showcases, the game enables players to take control of a human, an alien, and a predator as each race tries to achieve its various goals in the ice-bound pyramid. The human's mission is to rescue friends and remove facehuggers from their hugged faces. The alien's aspiration is to kill practically everything while finding suitable hosts for the aforementioned mug cuddlers. And the predator's endgame is to hunt down the other temple dwellers and take lots of nice skulls home for the trophy cabinet. You'll have to take our word on the alien and predator stuff though, because footage doesn't seem to exist. It's very basic as far as platformers go, with small sprites and bland visuals. The decision to allow players to take on the role of humans, aliens, and predators is appreciated, but forcing them to become the human first means that many were turned off from the game before the wall-crawling aliens or super powerful predators were unlocked. Even if you were allowed to play as one of the non-humans from the get-go though, Alien vs Predator by Superscape couldn't exactly be called revolutionary. It doesn't exude the atmosphere of a mysterious, xenomorph-filled temple beneath the frozen tundra of Antarctica, and even as a mobile game of its era, it's just a bit of a bore. Honestly, this one's better off being put on ice. Number 44, Predator, 2004, mobile. Yet another similar-looking mobile title, Predator, was also released in 2004. It resembles Superscape's Alien vs Predator, but gives players the opportunity to play as the Predator straight away, allowing impatient Yautja aficionados to get straight into the trophy hunting action, attacking the hapless human quarry with deadly claws, penetrating smart discs, and the all-important plasma cutter. This one was developed and published by India Games and places you in the adaptive camouflage of a predator whose scout ship has landed in the jungles of South America next to a secret military facility. Luckily, with heavily armed, military-trained humans being prime hunting fodder, the mandibled menace has brought his arsenal along, and so the slaughter can commence. The game is composed of 7 stages, located either in the jungle exterior or inside the military base, and each location is filled with gun-toting soldiers to blast holes through and slice into bits before removing their skulls and most of their spine as souvenirs to remember your jungle vacation by. This all sounds like it might be a delightfully fun and gory romp, but Predator is completely blood-free. That's right. Those skulls come out pre-polished, which, while definitely saving our busy protagonist some time, just makes the whole thing seem very strange and subdued. Don't get me wrong, I'm not asking for a skull polishing minigame every time an enemy's insides become their outsides, but would a few crimson pixels here and there have been too much to ask? Lack of ability to sate my frantic thirst for graphic violence aside, this is another bare-bones mobile action platformer that was average at the time and is completely underwhelming today. It looks a bit nicer than its contemporaries, and engaging the active camo before walking straight up to an enemy and removing their face is amusing once or twice, but it's not going to make you throw your copies of Contra 3 or Super Metroid out the window. Number 43. Predators, 2010. Mobile. In 2010, the Predator franchise received something of a revival thanks to the aforementioned Predators movie, with Adrien Brody proving a tolerable protagonist and producer Robert Rodriguez successfully bringing his considerable talents and reverence for the original movie to bear. As such, a couple of mobile game tie-ins appeared in the same year to make the most of the upturn in interest. The first we're going to talk about is Predators by Gameloft. The other one is also called Predators, but we'll get to that later. Predators by Gameloft is a side-scrolling platformer with run-and-gun action that attempts to bring a Contra-like experience to the thumbs of mobile gaming Predators fans, but unfortunately falls way short of the mark. Initial signs are quite promising. The visuals aren't bad. There are some gameplay switching interludes where players run away from a pursuing predator while avoiding its attacks, and the idea of fighting your way through the galactic game reserve from the movie is appealing, but a few problems hold Gameloft's Predators back from ever being more than another janky mobile tie-in. The game was curtailed for its awkward controls and extremely choppy frame rate, meaning that controlling elite Black Ops turned mercenary Royce felt nowhere near as smooth as it needed to be, and the game ended up feeling frustrating rather than providing the fun, tense challenge that players wanted from a Predators tie-in. It's cool that Royce can run around and blast the denizens of the untamed game reserve planet, including some that were designed specifically for the game, but when it's this awkward to play, most people won't get more than 5 minutes in before moving on to something a little more palatable. After a bit of time with Gameloft's Predators, you'll be wanting to play something else almost as much as Royce and co wanted to get off that planet in the movie it's based on. Number 42. Alien vs Predator 3D, 2006. Mobile. Next on our list is a rail shooter that did the best it could with the technology at hand, featuring 3D graphics, locations based on the 2004 movie, a variety of extraterrestrial life forms to endanger, and one of the most adorable looking muzzle flash effects ever seen. I mean, look at that. Are we firing a gun or letting off a party popper? Come on, guys. Alien vs Predator 3D was developed by Superscape and is essentially a shooting gallery where players are ushered through an array of environments while moving a cursor around the screen, targeting and blasting the facehuggers, xenomorphs, and predators that inhabit the icy environments. Oh, and shooting the odd penguin, if you're a heartless sociopath or are carrying that penguin hatred over from Super Mario 64. Yeah, the visuals may look laughable today, but this was really quite impressive for a mobile game at the time, and it managed to stay rather slick too when it comes to frame rate and graphical glitches. The targeting reticule made up for mobile gaming impracticalities by snapping to nearby targets, and players could fire at the enemy or use environmental effects like exploding barrels and stalactites to do damage or make new paths. There were a number of collectible weapons on offer, and as the difficulty ramped up, the key to survival became a case of saving the ammo for your big guns while using the good old party popper pistol to take out more of the run-of-the-mill threats. The game did have some problems at the time though, with reviewers complaining that the levels were too long for quick bursts of mobile gaming action, and that the overall game wouldn't keep players occupied for more than a few hours, making Alien vs Predator 3D one of the few titles that manages to be both too long and too short. That's something to be proud of, I suppose. Number 41. Alien vs Predator 2 2D Requiem, 2007. Mobile. Right, things are getting really complicated now. This next game, Alien vs Predator 2 2D Requiem by prolific alien-themed mobile game developers Superscape, is based on the movie Aliens vs Predator Requiem, released in December of 2007. Unlike games based on the first AVP movie, however, this game does not share Aliens vs Predator Requiem's setting, and instead appears to take place in a similar era to the events of the film Aliens, with players encountering colonial marines instead of the National Guard that attempt to protect the town of Gunnison in the film. We won't pore over the lore of a relatively inconsequential 2007 mobile game though, so let's take a look at the gameplay instead. This one is a top-down, scrolling action title where players can take on the role of an alien or a predator and explore a secret facility laying waste to the hapless humans found within using the unique abilities of the aforementioned interstellar death dealers. With its top-down style, this Superscape effort bears quite a resemblance to the Alien Breed series, a very clearly Alien and Aliens-inspired set of titles developed by Team 17 and released primarily on the Amiga systems from 1991. Alas, Alien vs Predator 2 2D Requiem doesn't live up to Team 17's unofficial efforts, being somewhat of a clunky and repetitive corridor crawl that does very little to capture the atmosphere of either franchise. Yes, you can upgrade the aliens' attacks to have acid claws, and certainly you can use the Predator's cloaking ability to sneak around a bit and surprise the odd unfortunate scientist, but considering this was released in 2007, when you could have been blasting extraterrestrials on the excellently realised mobile port of Contra 4, does Alien vs Predator 2 2D Requiem really offer anything other than the AVP Requiem license? Well, yes. Disappointment? Number 40. Predator: The Duel, 2008. Mobile. Right, this is the last more or less identical looking mobile-only action platformer on our list, and this one sits at the top of that particular pile because, well, at least there are some reddish pixels when the big guy yanks out a spine. About time, too! Predator: The Duel was developed by IG Fun in 2007 and has a fairly cool idea behind it. The game follows a predator and a muscle-bound fellow named Major Duke, who seems to be something of a stand-in for Major Alan Dutch Schaefer from the original Predator movie. These two both find themselves inside the maximum security prison camp of Terminal City and must get through the various guards and security measures in an attempt to vanquish one another in a final showdown. As the Predator, players can de-skull their victims for a power boost, whereas Duke will occasionally have access to wall-crawling robot pal Robbie. Depending on who players choose, the finale of the game is very different, with either Duke or the Predator coming out on top, but as you'll soon see, neither conclusion is a suitably epic cinematic climax worthy of any of the accompanying movies. We can't tell which conclusion is more exciting, standing inside a shield generator and peppering the Predator with turrets for a couple of minutes, or breaking a bit of floor with some rocks and dropping down to murder a completely passive Duke with a single bop to the nose. Wow, so cool. There is a game called Predator: The Duel 3D that appears to be a sequel for this game and brings back the Predator and the Major to duke it out once again, but very little information and footage exists, and we can't even properly confirm what it was released for. Lacking the funds to hire a crack team of elite mercenaries to track it down, we're just going to have to call it Lost Media and head back to the LZ. Number 39. Alien, 1982. Atari 2600. It only feels fair to give the very oldest game on this list a bit of a boost up the ranking for being the very first one to do it, and 1982's Alien for the Atari 2600 has indeed received some favoritism. What's it doing all the way down here then? Well, would you believe that it's a bland Pac-Man clone? Look, I know the developers, Fox Video Games, didn't exactly have much to work with on the Atari 2600 and would have been hard-pressed to create anything resembling Ridley Scott's iconic space horror on such basic hardware, but this is literally Pac-Man with vaguely alien-looking sprites. It even has that constant siren blaring in the background. In the game, players take on the role of an unidentified human character and must explore the maze, which I suppose represents the maze-like halls and ducts of the Nostromo, crushing alien eggs and avoiding enemies. Using the once-per-life flamethrower ability causes the aliens to stop advancing for a moment, and collecting the flashing pulsar brings about a short period where the deadly xenomorphs turn blue and become vulnerable like the ghosts in Pac-Man. The reason for the ultimate killing machine's sudden susceptibility to being walked into remain, as far as we know, unexplained. After all all eggs are crushed, a brief bonus stage is activated that rips off Frogger. Reviewers at the time admitted that Alien for the Atari 2600 was perfectly playable, but did note that it was very derivative of better games that had come before it, and while the Pac-Man formula was suitably panic-inducing so as to represent the sheer terror of being stalked by groups of xenomorphs, the fact that this game so blatantly rips off another means that we couldn't put it any higher. It did, however, beat James Cameron to the whole multiple aliens idea. Maybe this game is what inspired him to make Aliens. Probably not, though. Number 38. Predator, 1987, MSX and NES. The very first game to be based on the Predator franchise was a run-and-gun action platformer simply titled Predator and was released in the same year as the movie. The two most prominent ports of the game, the MSX and NES version, were developed by Klon and Pack-In Video respectively, with the NES version being heavily based on the MSX edition, borrowing most of its graphical assets and music. In the game, you can expect to take on the role of Dutch Schaefer and explore jungle environments, facing off against local gorillas, wildlife, and bubbles, for some reason, before engaging in multiple battles against the big bad Predator itself. The NES version comes with additional exclusive levels featuring the larger sprites that only Nintendo's console was capable of, and in these auto-scrolling escapades, the player has to shoot the aforementioned bubbles? What? Collect power-ups, and fight an admittedly decent-looking larger Predator sprite at the end. If the NES version can manage fights like this halfway through the game, imagine what the finale will look like. Oh, it's a giant floating head. Of course it is. Anyway, while some outlets spoke positively of this movie tie-in shoot-'em-up, many agreed that the game was overly difficult. The NES version drags the game's overall position on this list down dramatically thanks to poor controls, a lack of relevance to the movie on which it was based, and some glaring graphical issues. I mean, Dutch wearing pink? You can't get more glaring than that. Also, what the hell are we fighting here exactly? Local rebel soldiers are understandable, giant tropical bugs are a bit of a stretch, but cute little jelly monsters, snapping ghost piranhas, scary looking bird things. I think poor Dutch might have been out in the jungle for too long. Bring him home. Number 37. Predator, 1987. Acorn Electric, Amiga, Amstrad CPC, Atari ST, BBC Micro, Commodore 64, and ZX Spectrum. While lumped in with the previously mentioned Predator for MSX and NES by the likes of Wikipedia, the Predator that was released across the various other computer entertainment systems available at the time was a quite different affair. It not only warrants a separate placing in our ranking, but also gets to come in a little bit higher thanks to a warmer critical reception at the time of release and the fact that it represents the source material that bit better. This version of Predator starts proceedings off with a combat drop, with the player forced to watch the rest of the crew jump out of the helicopter before Dutch can take to the scene, facing off against rebel soldiers and territorial birds in fairly standard run-and-gun action with some diagonal movement added in for variety. Most of the ports of Predator have some foliage in the foreground to really sell the jungle setting, and the game would occasionally switch to Predator vision, indicating that the unseen hunter has the player in its sights and giving them no choice but to hide next to the corpse of a fallen ally. It's kind of strange, considering this evasion method would absolutely not have worked in the movie, but the sudden heat vision activation and the appearance of sci-fi's most feared triangle would no doubt have sent shivers up the spine of any 80s gamer who got that far. Many didn't, though, as most ports of this game were unfairly difficult, and even if you did master it, a playthrough would take around 20 minutes tops. It's no all-time classic, and the versions running on the less powerful machines are especially clunky and esoteric, but hey, at least I'm not fighting jelly monsters in a pink jumpsuit. Number 36. AVP Evolution, 2013. Mobile. AVP Evolution was developed by Angry Mob Games and Fox Digital Entertainment and was conceived as a sequel to the 2010 mobile game Predators. No, not that 2010 mobile game called Predators, a 2010 mobile game called Predators that we haven't discussed yet. Come on people, it's not that complicated, there are just multiple games that came out at around the same time that have very similar if not exactly the same names. What's so confusing about that? Anyway, the thankfully uniquely titled AVP Evolution is a 3D action game where players control either an alien or a predator and embark on various slaughter-filled escapades in a facility where a group of super predators are attempting to assert control over an alien queen. In the alien missions, you start out as a captive face-hugger and must locate a victim with a nice, huggable face before evolving into the chest-burster phase and ultimately the iconic and powerful alien drone. While playing the Predator, you'll embody a dangerous jungle hunter predator who is opposed to the super predator's dishonorable alien controlling plan. No matter which species is being controlled, however, the humans of the facility are caught in the middle and are destined to quickly become twitching, bloody corpses. Be careful though, some of them are armed. It sounds and looks okay, but AVP Evolution was dismissed by most critics as a clunky and glitchy affair with stiff and graceless combat that was prone to crashing and ran poorly even when things were working as intended. When you consider it placed significantly lower than its mobile-based predecessors, there's certainly not much evolution going on here at all. In fact, I would demand they strip the word evolution from the title, but then it would just be another game called Alien vs Predator, and I just don't think we can keep track of them anymore. Peter?
Number 35. Predator Concrete Jungle, 2005, PS2 and Xbox. Right, it's time to see what a fully fledged console-based Predator game can do. Unfortunately, if initial perceptions of 2005's Predator Concrete Jungle are anything to go by, not a lot. But let's give it a fighting chance, shall we? Predator Concrete Jungle was developed by Eurocom and adopts the flavour of the second film in the series, being set in an urban environment rather than the traditional jungle setting. Predator 2, the movie, while critically slammed at the time of its release, has gone on to achieve cult status amongst action film buffs, while Predator Concrete Jungle is all but forgotten, and that's probably got a lot to do with its inadequacy in any aspect of what makes a great video game. Generally, the only good thing most critics could bring themselves to say about it was that it had good ideas, and we'd have to agree. The game kicks off in 1930, with our predatory protagonist keeping to that Predator tradition of seeking out hotbeds of conflict and hunting down the deadliest, heavily armed humans around by going after a mafia boss named Bruno. But alas, the Predator is wounded in the encounter and leaves behind some of his equipment, which causes him to be shamed and banished by his clan. After 100 years of exile, the Predator, now known as Scarface of all things, has the chance to redeem himself by returning to Earth and getting that technology back from the mob boss's descendants. It's a decent premise, but the game unfortunately fails to back it up in any way. Predator Concrete Jungle just reeks of wasted potential. Even the story was mishandled despite that interesting hook, and while some reviewers reported that the wealth of weapons options and vision modes could combine into some isolated moments of fun, almost everything about the game was found lacking. The wonky camera, the basic stealth and combat, the controls, the graphics, the gameplay, oh my! This one should have stayed on Safari. Number 34, Aliens the Computer Game, 1986, Apple II, Amstrad CPC, Commodore 64, and ZX Spectrum. We're returning to Alien-only territory now, and this return comes in the form of Activision's Aliens the Computer Game, which released in 1986. It's important to specify Activision's involvement in this because there was actually another game called Aliens the Computer Game that also came out in 1986. Honestly, all these games coming out in the same year and having the same name is giving us both chest pains. Unless... oh god, no, it can't be. Anyway, this Aliens the Computer Game, the one developed by Activision, is a series of mini-challenges intersected by interactive graphical sequences. These story sections feature artwork that reflects scenes from the film Aliens, and text that accurately relays that scene's dialogue. This game sticks to the plot of the movie as much as possible, providing an abridged text-based retelling of the opening scenes, and with the actual gameplay kicking off when Ripley and the Marines set out for LV-426. The game's first challenge, that of identifying the Marines' equipment, isn't exactly the sort of thing that'll get your heart monitor spiking, but it then picks up the pace with movie-adjacent playable sections as the plot progresses, including securing corridors, fighting off hordes of drones, navigating bug-filled air vents, and engaging in a big old throwdown between the Alien Queen and Power Loader. Alas, despite this impressive mix of gameplay styles and dedication to its source material, Activision's Aliens the Computer Game is just a bit stale, and the decision to spread the gameplay over multiple styles instead of concentrating on one or two resulted in all of the experiences being short-lived, unremarkable, and mediocre. It did okay at the time, but like the visual effects in the dropship sequence of the movie it's based on, it doesn't hold up all that well today. Number 33, Alien vs. Predator, The Last of His Clan, 1993, Game Boy. Our next entry is Alien vs. Predator The Last of His Clan, a side-scrolling action game released on the Game Boy. Nintendo's classic handheld isn't exactly known for its visceral and violent sci-fi horror experiences, but Japanese developer ASK Kodansha thought that they saw a hole in the market and leapt right in. The game puts players in the role of a lone predator who must stalk through an array of ducts and corridors on the planet Alpha Centauri 3, putting down anything xenomorph related along the way. Alien vs Predator: The Last of His Clan tells a tale of honor and retribution, as the aliens encountered on Alpha Centauri 3 were planted there by the protagonist's clan in the hopes they'd infect the local humans and multiply into a fine crop of alien prey. Upon returning to the planet though, hunting gear in tow, the predators found that the aliens had expanded much quicker than anticipated and wound up killing every predator in the clan, save for the protagonist, who now seeks to regain the clan's honor by claiming the alien queen's head as a trophy. This is all well and good, but in reality, the greatest threat faced by players is boredom. The game expands its meager runtime by forcing players to collect wall-breaking bombs and keys and navigate the featureless stages in the most circuitous route possible, routinely chopping up or lasering the various alien lifeforms over and over again along the way. The whole thing comes across as more than a little dry, and culminates in one of the most half-arsed final boss encounters you're ever likely to see in video games. The gameplay is fine, but the package that is Alien vs Predator: The Last of His Clan offered little to fans back then, and offers even less now. One to forget, we think. Number 32. Alien Blackout 2019. Mobile. What do you get when you cross the Alien franchise with the Five Nights at Freddy's games? You get D3 Go, Theory Interactive and Rival Games attempt at an atmospheric Alien game for mobile devices. Alien Blackout. It picks up the plot threads after the events of Creative Assembly's 2014 hit Alien Isolation, with players assuming control of Amanda Ripley, who finds herself on board the Mendel space station with, surprise, most of the crew dead and a xenomorph roaming the halls. Seriously, the Ripley family just can't seem to catch a break with these things. As a group of potential rescuers board from a passing ship, Ripley's job is to guide them around the station, keeping the xenomorph at bay and trying to keep as many of her allies alive as possible. This is achieved through clicking on various icons to cause different results, such as closing doors and giving characters orders, with Ripley the Younger stationary at all times. Alien Blackout does a great job of communicating the atmosphere of a ransacked space station inhabited by a relentless primal killer, and the visuals, sounds, and voice acting combine to make for a very authentic feeling alien experience. However, a few crippling issues do quickly appear on the periphery of the proverbial motion scanner, threatening to hold the game back from being anything other than a brief distraction. A short runtime, no real reason to replay it, and alien AI that's very easy to exploit once you've deduced its tricks come together to make Alien Blackout a lesser experience than many of its mobile-based contemporaries, despite its production values and atmosphere. And there's also the fact that its existence is a bit of a kick in the teeth to those longing for a fully fledged Alien Isolation sequel. You know, Alien via Five Nights at Freddy's is cool and all, but it's nothing on experiencing that abject terror in first person once again. Number 31. Alien vs Predator 1992 SNES. Surprisingly, there are quite a few side-scrolling beat-em-ups based on the Alien and Predator franchises, and that likely has a lot to do with the genre's prominence when the early films in either franchise were doing the rounds. This one here, Alien vs Predator for the SNES, is the weakest of the lot though, as it's nothing more than a decidedly dodgy brawler from a period filled with absolutely legendary ones. The story behind the on-screen mayhem is set on the planet of Vega 4, where a brood of xenomorphs has managed to infiltrate the city of New Shanghai. The humans there sent out a distress signal, and a passing predator hunting party picked it up and decided to head planetside for a spot of alien chasing. God, poor humans of New Shanghai. Talk about out of the frying pan and into the fire. The problems become apparent after only a few moments of Alien vs Predator gameplay, as while the sprites themselves look okay, the visuals are generally muddy and underwhelming, and the animations are very stilted. Alien vs Predator also only appears to be able to render 2 enemy sprites on screen at any time, which severely limits options for interesting fights and set pieces. The bosses aren't up to much either, and the music throughout just doesn't sound like it fits. Now you might say that in this era that would be quite difficult to achieve, but Alien 3 on the Mega Drive does a great job of showing that 16-bit Alien-appropriate music can be done properly. Alien vs Predator isn't completely devoid of redeeming features, and it probably entertained a few SNES-owning button mashers with a penchant for aliens and predators back in the day, but compared to what console beat-em-ups were capable of at the time, this one is a bit of a blunder. In fact, that might be why its developers are now operating websites about Japanese transport timetables and ticket prices. Yeah, we thought that was pretty weird as well. Number 30, Predator 2, 1991, Game Gear, Master System, and Mega Drive. Officially tying in with the movie, the Acclaim-published Predator 2 games that came out on Sega consoles are top-down shooters where you step into the boots of Lieutenant Harrigan as he cleans up the streets of criminal scum and survives repeated face-offs with the Predator, rescuing lots of hostages along the way, just like any good action hero should. The Mega Drive version goes for an isometric viewpoint, while the Master System and Game Gear ports go for a more traditional style. Unfortunately though, none of them are all that great. The gameplay of the Mega Drive version was compared to Smash TV, with countless reams of underground mooks to smite, a fast pace to the gameplay, and a general gung-ho attitude. It was seen as decidedly average throughout, however, with very little to make it stand out amidst a slew of similar and more accomplished games. When the Predator shows up, things do start to get a little more interesting, with the City Hunter attempting to target the player with its plasma cutter or eyeing up hostages instead, resulting in a race against the red dots before said hostage gets zapped into tiny meaty pieces. That's not very honourable of you, is it, Mr. Predator? Tied up hostages don't exactly make for good sport. These moments can't amend for the game's general blandness, however, both in the visuals and gameplay departments, and the 8-bit renditions of the game drag its ranking down even further, with reviewers citing bland presentation, poor gameplay, and confusing visuals as reasons for marking it with sub 50% scores. Never pull your gun on a subway train, never offer sweets to invisible blokes in the cemetery, and never spend money on any of these Predator 2 Sega console ports. It's just not worth it. Number 29, Aliens vs Predator Extinction, 2003, PS2 and Xbox. This next Alien vs Predator video game experience differentiates itself from the myriad other Alien vs Predator video game experiences in a couple of ways. Firstly, its official stylization takes the time to spell out the word versus instead of lazily abbreviating it. Only one other game on this list does that. Wow. And secondly, it's a real-time strategy game. On consoles. Yeah, things aren't looking good from the off, I'm afraid. Now, to be fair to Aliens vs Predator Extinction, developed by the now defunct Zono Inc. and published by Electronic Arts and Fox Interactive, it does have some commendable aspects, as it offers a Marine, Alien, and Predator campaign, and manages to differentiate each faction so that they feel fully distinct. When you consider that the far better received Halo Wars was released a full 6 years later on more powerful consoles and only managed a UNSC campaign and didn't even include the Flood at all, it's enough to make us give Aliens vs Predator Extinction a tip of the cap. Unfortunately though, all the other stuff that Halo Wars did very well, Aliens vs Predator Extinction, well, didn't. Onlookers were dismayed by the short runtime, poor graphics, extremely questionable AI and pathfinding, and that old foe of the RTS game, balancing issues, and dismissed AVP Extinction as an underwhelming affair that was notable only for its missed potential. Most agreed that the developers did a decent job of formulating a control method that worked on consoles, which is easier said than done, but other than that, and the aforementioned variety in faction gameplay, the ho-hum factor was palpable with this one. I don't need a strategy game based on Alien vs Predator anyway. I already know my strategy if I ever encounter an alien or predator. I call it the runaway screaming tactic. It works every time, in many areas of my life, in fact. Number 28. Aliens, a comic book adventure, 1994, PC. Aliens, a comic book adventure is a graphical experience that attempts to tell a serious aliens-inspired story and engage the player with inventory-based puzzles, movie-like atmosphere, and a slow, thoughtful pace. In the game, developed by the once prolific Cryo Interactive Entertainment, players take on the role of Lieutenant Colonel Henriksen, a bit of a nod to Bishop actor Lance Henriksen, maybe, who must take his terraforming team to investigate a distress signal from a remote outpost known as B45C. As is usual with this kind of thing, the distress signal turns out to be a simple malfunction, and everyone shook hands and got on with their day. Now, I'm joking, of course. The distress signal was actually because of aliens. Bet you never saw that coming. Aliens, a comic book adventure's visuals flip-flop between the atmospheric and the bizarre, and progression takes the form of operating doors and using the mouse to point at things in the right order. There's also some grid-based combat thrown in, but none of this actually stops Aliens, a comic book adventure from feeling like a tedious slog that's as frustratingly paced as it is clunky and odd-looking. So why isn't it lower down the list? Well, Aliens, a comic book adventure did do one thing that franchise fans will definitely appreciate. It made the xenomorphs seem threatening again, whereas most video game adaptations before or since had reduced them to mere cannon fodder to be shot down in droves by flimsy human protagonists. In the first movie, one alien slaughters almost an entire starship crew with ease, and in Aliens, a squad of tooled-up Marines are hopelessly outclassed and almost wiped out by them in their first encounter. The enemies in Aliens, a comic book adventure feel more like those xenomorphs, and that is very commendable. If only the game was actually fun to play, then we might have had a winner on our hands. Number 27. Alien Resurrection, 2000, PS1. To many Alien fans, the 1997 movie Alien Resurrection marks the point where the franchise really started to slide into the drain of mediocrity. But would Argonaut Games' PS1 exclusive FPS of the same name prove to be a shining light for the Alien series? Well, no, but to be fair, there are some things that Alien Resurrection gets right. Reviewers and players reported a heightened sense of atmosphere and immersion and some legitimately scary moments, the sound design was on point, and the graphics, while basic, did a good job of selling the dingy, uninviting environments. However, overly frustrating gameplay soon turned that tension into tedium. The game's story vaguely follows the plot of the film, with players taking control of a clone of Ellen Ripley who must escape the infested research ship, the USM Auriga. But the action never really picks up beyond the same old corridor crawling, and Alien Resurrection quickly outstays its welcome. Like Alien's Colonial Marines, this could be attributed to a troubled development, with the game initially slated to release in 1998, much closer to the film's release window, but repeatedly missing its deadlines. It also reportedly went through some sweeping gameplay changes during development, with the initial design being a top-down shooter influenced by Gremlin Interactive's irreverent PS1 and Saturn shooter, Loaded. There's probably a touch of irony then in the fact that Alien Resurrection's development studio, Argonaut, were the opposite of loaded after the game was released, with its poor sales and prolonged development heavily contributing to the company's eventual liquidation in 2004. Then again, they did enjoy a brief reappearance into the limelight when their unreleased Nintendo collaboration, Star Fox 2, finally saw the light of day on the Super NES Classic Edition in 2017. One could almost call it a resurrection. Well, not really, because the studio is still dead. But any excuse for a bit of wordplay, right? Number 26. Aliens vs. Predator Requiem, 2007, PSP. Released during the golden era of the inconsequential and painfully bland movie tie-in action game, Aliens vs. Predator Requiem for the PSP is an inconsequential and painfully bland movie tie-in action game, and may even be one of the most inconsequential and painfully bland movie tie-in action games of all time. Nothing about it is especially awful, nothing will leave you feeling enraged, betrayed, or disgusted, but the game has zero redeeming features either. Developed by long-running studio Rebellion, who will definitely appear later on in our list, Aliens vs. Predator Requiem was exclusive to Sony's successful handheld, reportedly due to Rebellion's previous experience with the likes of the average but successful Star Wars Battlefront Renegade Squadron and the, inconsequential and painfully bland movie tie-in action game Miami Vice: The Game. Aliens vs. Predator Requiem bucks the trend of many similarly titled games by eschewing human and alien campaigns and instead focusing entirely on a Predator protagonist who responds to a fellow Yautja's distress call coming from the Colorado town of Gunnison. Playing as this one Predator cleanup crew, it's the player's job to make mincemeat of all the xenomorphs in town, swat aside any annoying humans who get in the way, and remove any trace of your fellow Predators having ever touched down on Earth. This is accomplished across 15 missions of very samey third-person action fare, and culminates in a final explosive showdown in an alien-infested hospital. But hey, you might say that a hospital is an appropriate setting to end such a paint-by-numbers video gaming experience, as Aliens vs. Predator Requiem's blandness, combined with its insultingly easy difficulty level that requires only the most half-hearted and perfunctory button mashing to be able to get through the entire game, will likely see you slipping off into a boredom coma by the end of it. Oh, and did I also mention it's inconsequential and painfully bland? Let's move on. Number 25. Aliens vs. Predator 2010. PC, PS3, and Xbox 360. In 2010, British developer Rebellion had another crack at the razor whip by attempting to reboot the AVP series of games on PC, PS3, and 360. It wasn't their first Xenomorph rodeo either, having already been responsible for a couple of well-received games that combined the two iconic extraterrestrials in the past. This particular bite of the AVP cherry, though, was not so well received, failing to impress in ways that its predecessors managed. This wasn't due to lack of content, though. Aliens vs. Predator comes with a full campaign for the Marines, the Alien, and the Predator, and also a substantial multiplayer offering for sociable gamers to sink their mandibles into. The human campaign is the most standard FPS experience, featuring the Marines' real-world adjacent weaponry and equipment, like shoulder-mounted torches and the staple motion tracker. The Alien campaign boasts a lot of close-quarters killing and makes use of the Xenomorph's ability to climb walls and leap long distances, and the Predator campaign has more of a tactical approach, with the player leaping from branch to branch and using various vision modes available to set up stealthy kills. Now this all sounds great, and Rebellion did do a commendable job of capturing the required atmosphere, so what went wrong? Well, according to reviewers at the time, Aliens vs. Predator was something of a slapped-together mishmash of half-baked ideas. Awkward gameplay, an odd melee system, and a general soullessness were cited as reasons for this being one of 2010's most disappointing titles, and even the asymmetric multiplayer couldn't save it from being another underwhelming experience. It's not going to insult you like Aliens Colonial Marines, and it might be worth a blast for the curious, but for the most part, this is yet another one of the blemishes on Rebellion's somewhat spotty report card. Number 24. Aliens Alien 2, 1987, MSX. I tell you, if we were ranking these games for how confusing their titles were, there'd be a lot of contenders for the number 1 spot, but this one would surely come out on top in the end. But it is also the only game on our list with legendary Final Fantasy composer Nobuo Uematsu involved, so at least it's got that going for it, I suppose. Aliens Alien 2 was released exclusively for the MSX and only in Japan, and it was developed and published by Squaresoft. It was one of 2 video games to be released consecutively, with the 1987 sequel to Alien, and this region-locked side-scrolling shooter is by far the more obscure. It sees you take direct control of Ripley as she attempts to put down the face-hugging, chest-bursting xenomorph threat using whatever guns, grenades, and power-ups she can salvage in order to rescue Newt and get the heck out of Dodge. Like many shoot-em-ups of the era though, Aliens Alien 2 would be a whole lot more fun if it wasn't so punishingly difficult, as players require Marine Corps level training to survive it, and even then they'd have approximately the same chance of making it as the Marines who touch down on LV-426. That is, about 1 in 12, and you'll probably still end up with acid burns and partial blindness. Regardless, if you can get past this difficulty roadblock, Aliens Alien 2 is a fun little retro shooter with an interesting claim to fame, courtesy of its pre-Final Fantasy Uematsu soundtrack, but it's ultimately a mildly stimulating curio, and little more. Number 23. Alien 1984, Amstrad CPC, Commodore 64, and ZX Spectrum. Our next game, Concept Software's Alien, interprets the then one-movie Alien franchise as a strategy-adventure experience. In the game, an omniscient player selects crew members from an overview of the Nostromo, ordering them to move to different areas, pick up useful equipment, and attempt to fight back against the xenomorph that constantly stalks the cargo holds and corridors. Concept Software's Alien may look laughable by today's standards, but it has a surprising amount going on under the hood that meant many reviewers at the time saw it as a bit of a must-buy. At the start of the game, a random crew member is killed by the alien, and it's the player's job to keep as many people alive as possible while attempting to flush out the relentless killer and get back to Earth. It's not as simple as just selecting Ripley and sending her off to the self-destruct button though, as the character's mental state must be considered. If you send unarmed crewmates off on their own, their confidence is likely to take a hit, understandable to be honest, and crew members who are nervous wrecks may refuse to obey orders, sending your best laid plans tumbling out of the airlock. As well as randomly selecting which crewmate is killed early on, the game will also indiscriminately assign which crew member is secretly an android, and this, along with the top-down aesthetics, give the game a feel that's not dissimilar to many modern board games where certain players have secret identities and objectives. Concept Software's Alien didn't win over all of its contemporaries, with some seeing it as a bland experience with very little action, and it would certainly be deemed extremely clunky and awkward to play by today's standards, but it did manage to offer some tense thrills to Alien fans of the 80s. Oh, and also, every now and again, Jonesy will dash across the screen. Ah, and everyone loves Jonesy, right? Oh, game of the decade! Number 22. Aliens Thanatos Encounter, 2001, Game Boy Color. Australian developer Wicked Witch Software, who've come up already on this list with their mobile game offerings, seem to be big fans of the Alien franchise. When they were offered the opportunity to develop an Alien title on the Game Boy Color, they jumped at the chance and reportedly endeavoured to add every single Aliens-inspired weapon and piece of equipment they could think of, regardless of the development challenges. You'd think such a clear labour of love would result in an all-time classic, or at least a respectable 7 out of 10, but Alien's Thanatos encounter unfortunately falls just below that bracket thanks to some basic visuals, slow-paced gameplay, and frustrating AI. It's not a total loss though, as Wicked Witch Software did implant some interesting ideas into this handheld top-down shoot-'em-up. The game takes place aboard an alien-infested space freighter called the Thanatos, and players can choose their marine from a motley crew of privates and cadets before setting off on their quest to rescue the stricken survivors and blast the encroaching aliens into fizzling puddles of acid. A tactical twist is offered by offering 3 firing options, where you can alter the way the marine moves and shoots depending on your preferences and the current threat. Players will also find themselves under a time limit to rescue the Thanatos survivors, which serves to add a bit of tension to the gameplay. Even with these factors though, Alien's Thanatos encounter is a below-average shoot-'em-up with decent gameplay that's hampered by some frustrating mechanics and uninspired presentation. It's not the worst thing you could encounter in the bowels of a drifting space freighter, but there are definitely lots of more interesting Game Boy Color games to play while stranded in the bleak expanse of space. Number 21. Predator 2, 1990. Amiga, Amstrad CPC, Atari ST, Commodore 64, PC, and ZX Spectrum. This next video game interpretation of the second Predator movie was developed by Oxford Mobius, or ARC Developments depending on the version, and presented an old-school rail shooter in the style of classics like Operation Wolf. This was the first game to be released based on the Predator 2 film, beating the Mega Drive, Master System, and Game Gear titles to the punch by a year or so, and beating them in the review stakes too, although only just. In the game, players are given the opportunity to play as Lieutenant Harrigan and to take to the streets of Los Angeles in an attempt to blast the city's gang problem into submission. This is complicated though by the fact that everyone's favourite active camo-clad extraterrestrial is stalking the rooftops and subways, and he's not hunting for some of Los Angeles' famous street tacos either. If you've played or seen footage of the aforementioned Operation Wolf, then you'll already have an idea of what this game offers. A set route through a grimy city setting packed full of thugs and gang enforcers to fill with bullet holes while attempting to avoid blasting innocent civilians, all with a see-through Harrigan to keep you company. The Amiga version was a fun mouse-controlled shooter and a decent distraction for franchise fans, and owners of the older, lower-spec systems like the Commodore 64 still appreciated the range of levels and visual effects. However, Predator 2 is still an average blast-em-up at best, with very little to offer today's more refined gamer. Unlike the film on which it was based, this one did not get more of a following with age. But having said that, I do feel like this guy who insists on running up to offer a cop what appears to be a chocolate bar while said cop is mid-firefight deserves his 15 minutes of fame, if just for the sheer brazen stupidity. Godspeed, reckless chocolate bar guy. Anyway, Ben?
Number 20. Predators, 2010. Mobile. One last mobile game for you busy gamers on the go, and another game called Predators that was released in 2010. Oh god, why? This one was published by Chilingo, and at least looks a lot more appropriate for its era. Chilingo's Predators features 3D graphics and eschews the old-school action platformer style of Gameloft's 2010 mobile title, also called Predators, in favour of something a bit more modern. Chilingo's Predators features fast-paced hack-and-slash gameplay, an isometric viewpoint, and more gratuitous gore than you can shake a combi stick at, and honestly, it's alright, and thus receives the honour of marking the point in our list where the games start to become genuinely worth tracking down and playing. In Predators, players are tasked with controlling a Yautja warrior looking for full membership into a Predator clan, and in order to receive this honour, this savage hunter must prove himself on the game reserve planet featured in the film of the same name, facing off against dangerous local fauna, killing the heavily armed humans who have been deposited there as prey, and even facing off against other predators. Chilingo's Predators recreates the unnamed planet with accomplished graphical flair for a mobile title of the era, and didn't try to be too fancy or finicky, offering fast-paced violence violence with very little distracting nonsense in between. It's about as basic as a hack and slash could be, and isn't going to be troubling the likes of Dante or Mr. Hayabusa anytime soon, but it offers a decent visceral experience for a mobile game, and that is why it's the highest ranking mobile title on our list. If only it was still on the App Store, but unfortunately it appears to have fallen foul of the ultimate predator of digital-only games of its ilk, licensing issues. Number 19. Aliens the Computer Game, Software Studios, 1986, Amstrad CPC, Commodore 64, and ZX Spectrum. Yes, we have already discussed a video game called Aliens the Computer Game that was also released in 1986, but this one was developed by the excitingly named Software Studios, and of the 3 Aliens titles that came out on or around the original release of the Aliens movie, it's the one that got the best press response by far. With Aliens the Computer Game, Software Studios opted for a first-person approach. The player is able to control various characters from the film while attempting to explore the maze-like layout of the atmosphere processor searching for the alien queen and her nests. It's not only the xenomorph attacks that are the problem though, as players will have to keep an eye out on the biomechanical growth that's spreading throughout the facility, as new eggs and facehugger enemies will spawn if the spread is left unchecked. This nifty little mechanic, along with the tight gameplay and ability to capture a modicum of the movie's atmosphere using such archaic visuals, are what won Software Studios' Aliens the Computer Game such high praise at the time. The first-person viewpoint was an inspired choice and went a long way to capture the feel of the movie scenes in which the Marines are exploring the infested corridors of LV-426. Of course, it's very difficult to imagine getting spooked by these adorable little xenomorph sprites today, and Software Studios' Aliens the Computer Game lacked the visual and audio refinement of its Activision-published rival. But it was the best and most atmospheric Aliens title available at the time, and we respect its face-hugging, chest-bursting legacy. It's also the only game we found on our list that lets you take direct control of Carter Burke, which means you get to send the little weasel off on a one-way trip to an unpleasant alien encounter and give him his just desserts. Satisfying. Number 18. Aliens Online, 1998, PC. It's lucky those pesky alien embryos can't be distributed through dial-up internet connections, or this 1998 massively multiplayer FPS experience would have caused a worldwide xenomorph outbreak of disastrous proportions. Although, considering the average internet speed in 1998 was 56 kilobytes per second, users of Mythic Entertainment and Kesmai's Alien Online would have had plenty of time to make their escape while the egg was still downloading. With its asymmetric, team-based multiplayer, its integration of RPG elements, and its ability to host more players than the average online FPS at the time, Aliens Online seemed to have a lot going for it, and indeed, many contemporary reviewers encouraged franchise fans to give it a go. The game was free to play if the player was a paid-up member of GameStorm, an online gaming platform initially offered by Kesmai that provided a number of online games to play for a flat membership rate. Aliens Online was one of the highlights of this service, offering an eventual total of 9 maps upon which to play various Alien vs. Marines scenarios, with additional maps and updates supplied at no extra cost to GameStorm members. Unfortunately though, Aliens Online was a victim of its era, with laggy connectivity and debilitating bugs hampering the enjoyment of many who signed up. More critical onlookers would also cite a lack of variety and some bland level design as reasons to approach this one with caution, but if you were fully signed up to GameStorm already, there was no reason not to at least give Aliens Online a go. Are you signed up to GameStorm? No, you are not, because Electronic Arts bought the service and then promptly shut it down in 2001. Oh, Electronic Arts, you are truly the Weyland-Yutani of the video game world. Number 17. Predator Hunting Grounds, 2020, PC and PS4. We're staying online for our next entry, but switching franchises, as Predator Hunting Grounds is a modern online shooter that doesn't have to bother itself with such concerns as 56 kbps connection speeds. It was also the first solely Predator-based video game released for a decade, and the first home console one since Predator Concrete Jungle in 2005. Technology took a few leaps forward in those 10 years, so what did Predator Hunting Grounds do with all that extra processing power? Well, it gives players the chance to go head-to-head in asymmetrical multiplayer in unforgiving jungle environments, attempting to complete various objectives while out-killing the enemy. Would-be jungle hunters can customize their avatar, and for the first time, players are able to step into the hunting boots of a female predator. Predator Hunting Grounds also adds a bit of legitimacy by including characters from the films, such as Isabel from 2010's Predators and Dutch from 1987's Predator, with Alice Braga and Arnold Schwarzenegger reprising their respective roles. This all sounds like a recipe for online shooter success, and the game definitely built a dedicated and vocal following, but the reality is that Predator Hunting Grounds was not quite as good as it needed to be. While it seems decent at a glance, the game is actually a bit janky looking for a modern title, and reviewers cited boring objectives and underwhelming gameplay that can only occasionally hit peaks of excitement as reasons to go into this one cautiously. Its popularity has dropped off dramatically in recent years, with Steam's average consecutive player count languishing in the low double figures, but it's still there if you want to jump online and blast some strangers with your plasma casters and assault rifles. Just don't expect an instant combat drop. Number 16. Alien 3, 1993. Game Boy. That's enough modern polygonal sci-fi horror for a moment. It's time to go back to good old monochrome pixelated xenomorphs, just like Geiger intended. This particular handsome chap comes from Alien 3 on the Game Boy, one of a spate of Alien 3 tie-in titles that released with the film that we're splitting into 3 separate entries. Bit Studios' Alien 3 for the Game Boy takes on the form of an old-school top-down shooter, which admittedly looks rather unimpressive by today's standards. However, reviewers at the time labelled it as a top-notch experience, and retro-minded modern players should definitely find at least a little bit to enjoy in this tightly designed corridor crawler. You are Ripley, complete with her recent dramatic haircut, and get to explore the prison facility, solving puzzles, fighting off aliens and facehuggers, and cook every egg she finds, and I don't mean over easy. Successfully surviving the infested facility will result in a climactic face-off with the alien queen, and, well, at least this one moves, so it's got that going for it over the queen from fellow Game Boy title Alien vs. Predator: The Last of His Clan. Alien 3 on the Game Boy is by no means spectacular, and reviewers and players at the time were dismayed by the lack of a save feature or password system, but Bit Studio remedied this by making the campaign under an hour long. Hold on, is that a case of 2 wrongs not making a right? Anyway, whatever your stance on Alien 3's campaign length and lack of saving, the tight controls, inoffensive puzzles, and surprisingly tense action in a game that looks and sounds about average for a Game Boy title means that this one is far from a disaster. Definitely the best 8-bit alien encounter to enjoy on the go. Number 15. Aliens Extermination, 2006. Arcade. It's time to brave the alien-infested arcades now, as our next title is one of those coin-guzzling, gun-mounted arcade machines that you might find at the local bowling alley. The story of this play mechanics developed shooter concerns a couple of squadrons of colonial marines going on an ill-advised mission back to LV-426, which definitely has a bar, but probably doesn't have a bowling alley. Aliens Extermination picks up years after the destruction of Hadley's Hope and sees the investigating Marines coming face to face with hordes of sinewy danger bugs. Players must mercilessly blast anything that skitters in front of them in a series of desperate kill or be killed situations, while background Marines repeatedly throw out random lines from the movie. If you enjoy such quips as "Stay Frosty," "Let's Rock," and the timeless "They're coming out of the walls," then you'll be hearing all of them here endlessly. Of the arcade games on our list, Aliens Extermination is probably the weakest. The graphics are somewhat disappointing, and the audio design, story, and atmosphere leave quite a bit to be desired. That's not what people are looking for in the constantly distracting arcade environment though, so we won't be too hard on it for these missteps. What we will dock it a few positions for is its unfair difficulty. It's no surprise that arcade games are meant to be difficult to try and evacuate all of the coins from your pocket, but Aliens Extermination is difficult in a few annoying ways. Most egregiously by causing players to lose lives if they shoot friendly Marines, and constantly placing said friendly Marines in the way and often in poorly lit environments where they can barely be seen. If the weight of your coin purse isn't an issue though, Aliens Extermination offers a satisfying, casual romp through xenomorph-flooded shooting galleries, and sometimes that's all you need to ease an itchy trigger finger. Number 14. Aliens Armageddon, 2014. Arcade. Don't put the coin purse away yet, Buster, because we're staying in the arcades for another entry, and this one is a sequel to the previously discussed Aliens Extinction. Once again developed by Play Mechanics, Aliens Armageddon goes down a story avenue that the Alien movies have yet to explore. The xenomorph threat spreading over all of Earth and causing a worldwide apocalyptic event. This unfortunate set of circumstances was caused by an infested research ship known as the Capella having its self-destruct systems activated close enough to Earth that alien-riddled debris rained down all over the planet. Not ideal. Throughout the arcade game's short campaign, it's up to the player-controlled Marines to help evacuate the last of humanity to a deep space cargo ship called the Ark, leaving the Earth behind. The game itself is another casual arcade shooter that's designed to give players a noisy arcade thrill and convince them to part with their hard-earned coinage, but it looks a bit nicer than its predecessor, employing a cel-shaded approach, features tight and responsive gunplay, and mostly does away with Aliens Extinction's accidental marine shooting annoyances. Basically, if you find yourself in an arcade that has this in it and you've got some doubloons in your pocket, you won't regret giving it a go. Oh, and confusingly, if you find yourself in an arcade and you see a cabinet for a game called Alien Covenant, then that is also this game, as it was rebranded in 2017 to help promote that film. Also, try not to confuse it with 2 out of 10 IMDb rated movie Alien Armageddon, which is unrelated to the Alien franchise and probably isn't going to get an arcade adaptation anytime soon. Shame. Number 13. Alien 3, 1992. Amiga, Commodore 64, Game Gear, Master System, Mega Drive, and NES. Probe Software's Alien 3 has a lot going on when it comes to ports. As mentioned in the Alien 3 for the Game Boy entry, there were a number of games with the Alien 3 moniker released to coincide with the film's emergence, and we're lumping all but the Game Boy and SNES versions in the same entry, as they're as identical as the power of their respective systems would allow. The Commodore 64 port is especially impressive and is easily one of the better looking games on that particular machine. When you consider C64 games often look like this, Probe did an amazing job. The Amiga and Mega Drive versions were very similar, and while the Master System version couldn't match the visuals of its bigger brother, it made up for it by adding a 2-player mode, which was a nice surprise. Whatever version you were playing though, you could expect a selection of timed missions through various expansive stages based on locations from the movie. During these missions, Ripley has to use the various available weapons to fight off alien drones and facehuggers while attempting to save cocooned prisoners before they get a very unsettling case of indigestion. The visuals were decent, the sound effects were appropriate, and the Mega Drive version has a real sleeper hit of a 16-bit soundtrack, but Alien 3 could be frustrating and overly punishing with its respawning aliens that pop out of nowhere and its stage memorization-based gameplay loop. Attempting to locate all of the stricken prisoners in time across multiple maze-like environments inevitably became a bit too repetitive. For its atmospheric vent-crawling and satisfying xenomorph blasting, however, Alien 3 definitely deserves praise. But when you consider the variety in gunplay that most shooters of the era could offer, Alien 3's one-note gameplay just about keeps it from bursting into the top 10. Number 12. Alien 3, 1993, SNES. When Probe Software developed the SNES version of Alien 3, which was released a year after the Mega Drive and Amiga versions, they decided to make a few changes to the recipe of the previous title. At first glance, it looks like it could be a graphical reskin of the same game, but Alien 3 on the SNES does away with the repeated timed missions of that other version and presents a Metroidvania-like experience set across 6 stages with a password system so that players don't have to smash through the whole thing in one sitting. While the visuals look a little dull and over-reliant on greys and browns, they do a decent job of capturing the feel of the prison facility and foundry location from the movie, and Ridley's sprite is much smoother and more natural looking than her Mega Drive and Amiga counterpart. Instead of racing to locate prisoners in every stage, Ripley is tasked with a number of different objectives that are spread out across the expansive locations. This may include the freeing of prisoners, but could also involve such tasks as fixing pipes, repairing fuses, or welding doors shut. I would not be able to do any of these things, even in the most ideal circumstances, so for Ripley to achieve all of this while having acid-blooded killing machines breathing down her neck is quite the undertaking. That's what it takes to be an action hero, I suppose. Like the Mega Drive game of the same name, Alien 3 on the SNES can't realistically be rated among the very best on its platform, but it doesn't shame the system either, and with its more involved gameplay and less frustrating mechanics, is probably the better play for today's gamer. It even ends with a pixelated version of the movie's super depressing ending, too. Hooray! Number 11. Aliens Fireteam Elite, 2021. PC, PS4 and 5, Switch, Xbox One, and Xbox Series. Aliens Fireteam Elite is a third-person cooperative shooter produced by Cold Iron Studios that provides players with the opportunity to team up with online buddies and take on a number of missions across 4 campaigns and with access to 7 distinct character classes, with more of everything added in subsequent DLC. The customizable Marines are crew members on board the UAS Endeavour, a ship with the function of responding to distress signals in the outer colonies. I certainly hope they're getting paid well though, as unsurprisingly, these deep-sea danger seekers quickly find themselves face-to-face with Geiger's finest. Aliens Fireteam Elite does quite a few things right. The game offers up satisfyingly chaotic firefights with swarms of xenomorph critters and makes the aliens feel appropriately dangerous, as no matter how fortified you are and how much your squad digs in, they somehow always seem to manage to break through your defenses and send your plans spiraling out of a Weyland-Yutani office window. It also looks rather good, providing an accurate feeling and artistic take on the franchise's trademark stark, industrial sci-fi and biomechanical alien-infused architecture. The visuals only impress during gameplay, however, with character interactions brought down by canned animations and a complete lack of lip syncing. The AI saw plenty of complaints too, with lonesome players being forced to team up with bots that are more likely to hamper the experience than to enhance it, and reviewers spoke of samey mission design and awkward pacing impacting their enjoyment of the game. The player base has seen a substantial drop since launch, but Aliens Fireteam Elite offers private matchmaking, so if you can convince a couple of friends to suit up and join your bug hunt, you'll almost certainly enjoy blasting through what the game offers while throwing out appropriate movie quotes over party chat. You know, game over man, game over, and all that. You'll have a great time.
Number 10. Alien Trilogy, 1996, PC, PS1, and Saturn. We start our top 10 by going back to the early years of the FPS and celebrating one of the Alien franchise's first forays into the genre. Alien Trilogy, developed by Probe Entertainment and published by the ill-fated and oft-criticised Acclaim, may not look like much by today's standards, but this game more than held its own alongside highly regarded contemporaries like Duke Nukem 3D and Exhumed, known as Power Slave in the US, and maintains something of a cult following to this day. Alien Trilogy is, unsurprisingly, loosely based on the plots of the first 3 Alien movies, but we do use that term loosely to its fullest effect here, as Ripley is a Marine, whereas the first 2 movies especially thrive on her status as a non-combatant until it's absolutely called for. While franchise fans might call casting Ripley as a Marine sacrilege, Alien Trilogy does make up for this odd decision by nailing the appropriate alien atmosphere. And I don't just mean that they got the graphics right and made the menus on brand either. No, Alien Trilogy somehow captures the intangible things too, and really feels like it's part of the universe, although this is helped greatly by some stellar sound design. The gameplay wasn't perfect, with reviewers bemoaning some weak-feeling weapons and confusing level layouts, but for the most part the critical reception was warm, and the console versions, despite only containing the single-player campaign and missing the PC version's deathmatch mode, actually held up too, which was something that PS1 and Saturn owners of the time were not altogether used to. With its high production values and legitimate ability to spook and unsettle with the limited hardware available, Alien Trilogy was a great experience for Alien aficionados of the time, and an unfairly forgotten highlight of that early FPS era that gets so lovingly looked back on today. It even had these old-timey cutscenes. Talk about charm. Number 9. Alien vs Predator, 1994, Atari Jaguar. We're going even closer to the dawn of the first-person shooter now, with Rebellion-developed Atari Jaguar exclusive Alien vs Predator, which was heavily inspired by FPS granddaddies Wolfenstein 3D and Doom. That of course means rudimentary 3D environments seasoned with 2D digitized sprites. The game takes place in a marine training camp known as Golgotha, which is approached by an unknown derelict vessel. Once said vessel is retrieved and boarded for investigation, a xenomorph outbreak overtakes the camp, and the Marines send out a distress call and hunker down to try and defend the base. The distress call is picked up by a passing Predator ship, and loud, bloody, explosive violence ensues. Unusually for FPS games of the time, but in a move that would define Alien vs Predator titles for years to come, the game offers 3 separate campaigns where players can control an alien, a predator, or a marine, each with unique abilities, strengths, and weaknesses. The alien's objective is to rescue their queen, the predator's objective is to kill the queen, and the marine's objective is to peace out and leave them all to it. Aliens also have an interesting mechanic. Instead of being able to heal battle damage, the players can cocoon enemies, which act as a respawn point if the drone that they are playing as falls in battle. Alien vs Predator had a lot of ideas and impressed greatly on the Atari Jaguar. Reviews were positive, and the game proved to be the Jaguar's killer app. Realistically, it didn't have the quality of many of its PC-based contemporaries, but for owners of Atari's feline-themed system, this one is legendary. There's also the fact that Atari initially intended their console's AVP title to be a port of the SNES version of Alien vs Predator. You know, the one we put at number 31 because it's pants? Dodged a bullet there, Atari fans. Number 8. Aliens Dark Descent 2023. PC, PS4, PS5, Xbox One, and Xbox Series. The most modern Alien or Predator title at the time of recording, Aliens Dark Descent is an interesting xenomorph-infested take on the tactical strategy genre that was developed by Tindalos Interactive, previously responsible for the Battlefleet Gothic Armada games. No strangers to sci-fi franchises with dark and deadly universes, the developers infused the franchise with a top-down real-time tactics system that effectively builds panic in players as encounters spiral out of control, just as a real brush with a xenomorph infestation would. The game heavily evokes the tone of the second movie, with much of the action taking place on or around the USS Otago, a light assault spacecraft that crash-landed on the planet Lethe. Players are requested to outfit a squad of Marines and send them on missions to Lethe's surface, rescuing personnel and pushing back against the xenomorph threat. As the protagonists tackle the tasks at hand, the infestation will grow, meaning the Marines are more and more likely to be beset by waves of chitinous killers as time ticks away. This results in some tough decision-making, as players need to prioritize their objectives, with locations eventually becoming too hot for most squads to handle. Another nice touch is the game's approach to safe rooms, with players able to direct their squads to weld doors and create impregnable areas where Marines can rest up and commanders can collect their thoughts before heading back out into the fray. Despite nailing the atmosphere and tension building though, Aliens Dark Descent doesn't get everything right. Some technical issues hold it back, and the controls can often feel cumbersome when precision is needed, especially in stealth scenarios, but this doesn't stop Aliens Dark Descent from being a legitimately panic-inducing alien experience. Basically, if that infamous motion tracker sound gives you the jitters, we'd recommend seeking medical advice before playing this one. Number 7. Aliens vs Predator 1999. PC. Following their success with 1994's Alien vs Predator on the Jaguar, it was only natural for Rebellion to have another shot at the franchise, and this time put it on a platform where a few more people might actually get the chance to play it. 1999's Aliens vs Predator was released for home computers, and again used the 3 distinct campaigns idea, but further developed the uniqueness of each controllable lifeform. The Alien got the most obvious upgrade. Instead of simply being a melee-focused, speedier protagonist with a respawning mechanic, this time they were able to skitter up walls and along ceilings, with the action presented through a fisheye effect to depict their extraterrestrial biology. The Marine and Predator protagonists are mostly differentiated by their weapons and equipment, with the Predator making use of its cloaking device, powerful arsenal of exotic weaponry, and vision modes, and the Marine having access to more conventional gear and being able to chuck flares. Oh, that'll teach those aliens and predators. The 3 campaigns are entirely separate from each other this time around, with the Alien attempting to stow away on a shuttle bound for Earth, the Marines once again being sent out to LV-426, and the Predator on a planet-hopping mission to defeat enhanced aliens that have been created by human experiments. Aliens vs Predator was soundly praised by critics and enjoyed by players, with the impressive visuals and top-notch sound design helping to create an exhilarating and terrifying atmosphere, and the tight asymmetrical gameplay providing a plethora of tense and memorable moments. It did fall down in terms of presentation when compared to other recently released FPS titles like Unreal and Half-Life, but then again, when you're comparing yourself to the greatness of Half-Life, then it's always going to be difficult to come out on top. And besides, I'd like to see Gordon Freeman scampering up walls like you can in this game. Wait, no, maybe I wouldn't. That would actually be really creepy. Number 6. Aliens vs Predator 2, 2001, PC. For the sequel to Rebellion's Aliens vs Predator, American developer Monolith Productions stepped into the fray. These fellows, who would go on to create Fear and Condemned Criminal Origins, seemed to know a thing or two about creating a darkly atmospheric first-person game, and as such they should definitely be respected. Once again, there are 3 campaigns on offer here, and this time the stories intersect, with the settlement of LV-1201 being the centerpiece of the Alien, Predator, and Marine campaigns. Each campaign takes place in the lead-up to or the aftermath of a Predator activating its explosive self-destruct mechanism in the vicinity of a human-occupied complex after a fight with an alien goes badly. Honestly, it doesn't seem to take much to get these 3 species at each other's throats again, does it? Aliens vs Predator 2 was celebrated by the gaming press and received with open mandibles by the gaming public, with the visuals, fast-paced intense gameplay, and stellar sound design drawing players directly into its oppressive and dangerous world. Unfortunately though, it was overshadowed by some other FPS games that came out close to its release, like Return to Castle Wolfenstein and Halo Combat Evolved, which, let's be honest, borrowed so much from the movie Aliens that it might as well be on this list. Aliens vs Predator 2 did also have an expansion known as Primal Hunt, but this wasn't quite so successful with critics, who labelled it as boring, stale, and frustrating. It seems people didn't like playing as a facehugger, so we'll just brush that one under the rug, shall we? Oh, if only it were that easy, eh Ripley? Number 5. Alien 3: The Gun, 1993, arcade. You'll start to realise as we get further into our top-rated games that aliens seem to be at home in arcades. Lots of places to hide and shadowy corners to blend in with, I suppose. More to the point though, there are also lots of good games featuring aliens in arcades, and the venerable Alien 3: The Gun, developed by none other than arcade masters Sega, is one of them. Alien 3: The Gun rejigs the storyline of the movie Alien 3 so that it includes a couple of tooled-up colonial marines, and presents arcade goers with a cabinet that sports a couple of gun controllers modelled after the pulse rifle from Aliens. In fact, it almost seems like Sega really wanted to make an Aliens game rather than an Alien 3 one, and honestly, we completely understand. During gameplay, the player-controlled Marines navigate various on-rails sections on board the Sulaco, as well as on the surface of Fury 161, mowing down hordes of xenomorph enemies, and also facing off against a Weyland-Yutani agent who's been sent to retrieve xenomorph specimens by any means necessary. On top of all this, players have to avoid shooting the poor, innocent Fury 161 prisoners. Look, it even clearly states that he is prisoner, so leave him alone, okay? Alright, so Alien 3: The Gun isn't the most thought-provoking game ever made, but it's an arcade blaster, so it doesn't need to be. What it does need to be is action-packed, exciting, and just addictive enough to tease those extra pennies from your pockets. And critics agreed that it was, stating that Alien 3: The Gun did the movies proud, rating it as a must-play arcade title that eclipsed contemporary arcade shooters like Lethal Enforcers. It easily outguns the more recent Alien-based arcade shooters too. It is a bit of a misleading title though, because there are clearly at least 2 guns. Number 4. Aliens, 1990, arcade. In spite of its much-loved retro-futurist aesthetic, the influential action horror flick Aliens still manages to feel like it takes place in the 22nd century. Konami missed this memo though when they conceived their 1990 arcade hit Aliens, daubing the whole thing in as much 80s neon as possible and giving the world the most glamorous Ripley ever. But despite not quite capturing the atmosphere of the movies, unless my Aliens DVD has a fault with the brightness and contrast or something, and xenomorphs have always been luminous pink this whole time, Konami's Aliens did manage to absolutely nail the gameplay and present an addictive and satisfying arcade run and gun. The game allowed arcade goers to take on the role of Ripley or Hicks and shoot through brightly coloured, pixelated approximations of the film's locations, liberally applying smart gun rounds, missiles, and ignited flamethrower propellant to the facility's slight alien problem. Occasionally, gameplay will switch to a third-person rail shooter perspective, causing even more of a headache to those sensitive to bright lights and fast movement. Again, in spite of the aesthetic misstep, critics of the era heaped praise on Konami's Aliens, enjoying the fast-paced action, smooth controls, and satisfying ways in which the xenomorphs explode into smithereens upon coming into contact with flying lead. The numbers back up the title's quality too, with Aliens coming second only to the legendary Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in terms of arcade revenue for the prolific developer in 1990. Looking back on it with modern eyes, Konami's Aliens is an absolutely bonkers take on the film, with its outrageous colour palettes and bizarre use of invented xenomorph types, but it does all meld together into a fantastically fun and frenetic experience for arcade-going Alien fans. And also, I think I'm developing a bit of a crush on Glam Ripley. Can someone pass her a note with my number on? I'm too shy. Number 3. Aliens Infestation, 2011, DS. And now it's time for the hidden gem of this ranked list. Aliens Infestation was created by experienced hidden gem creators Way Forward Technologies, and took nostalgic gamers all the way back to the 16-bit era with a pixelated Metroidvania-style title that manages to eclipse its SNES and Mega Drive equivalents in terms of both content and quality. The game's plot concerns the USS Sephora, a spaceship full of colonial marines that happen to discover the drifting USS Sulaco. Teams are sent on board to investigate the life form detected inside, and the situation predictably gets out of hand very quickly. As already mentioned, the gameplay takes the Metroidvania route, with players looking for keys, equipment, and abilities that will help them reach new parts of the ship, whilst also incorporating mechanics taken from more action-focused shooting games like manual reloading and taking cover. Aliens Infestation also has an interesting mechanic when it comes to lives, as players will start out with a team of 4 Marines and must choose one to explore the Sulaco with. If this Marine dies, they're gone for good, and the player will then have to take control of another Marine. Stranded Marines can then be located throughout the game, which essentially act as extra lives, and thanks to the team writing unique dialogue for each and every one of them, and renowned comic book artist Chris Boccello handling their design, you're sure to get attached to certain characters, meaning it will really sting when your favourite grunt succumbs to a nasty xenomorph bite. Aliens Infestation received positive reviews at the time, and regard for the game has only grown in the years since its release, thanks to its satisfying gunplay and its stylish retro atmospheric take on Alien games of old. So if there's a Nintendo DS infesting your home somewhere, maybe it's time to dust it off and invest in Aliens Infestation. Number 2. Alien vs Predator, 1994, Arcade. We're heading back to the arcade for our number 2 game, and inviting the Predators back round too. I bet you'd forgotten all about those guys. It's been, 3 entries since we last spoke about them? Jeez. Well, they are back with a vengeance in Alien vs Predator, Capcom's 1994 arcade hit that attaches itself to the face of the side-scrolling beat-em-up genre and deposits more xenomorphs, predators, and cyborgs down its throat than you would have ever thought possible. Players can choose between 4 playable characters, 2 cyborgs and 2 predators. One of the cyborgs is a rather unhinged take on Major Dutch Schaefer, who certainly has some vague Arnie-like qualities about him, but has also replaced one of his arms with a smart gun rig. The other cyborg, though, is arguably the game's runaway hit character, Lieutenant Lin Kurosawa, a katana-wielding marine with a penchant for bright orange trousers. We hope she makes it into a film one day, and more importantly, that the film is good. We know that's a real long shot, but we can dream, can't we? Once a character is chosen, you must prepare for a non-stop ride through untold numbers of xenomorphs and other enemies, filled with cool bosses, memorable set pieces, and repeated situations where literally everything is on fire. The chaos becomes even more glorious when up to 3 players are involved, with beautifully crafted cyborg, predator, and alien sprites clashing all over the screen in an incredible cacophony of madness and violence. It's what we love to see. Capcom's Alien vs Predator's graphics and gameplay were held in high regard by all who reviewed it, and the game is often hailed as one of the greatest arcade experiences of all time. In 2013, Capcom stated that more fans are asking for an HD version of this game than any of their other classic retro titles. And to that I say, it's been over a decade since you said that, Capcom, and I'm still not seeing it. Don't you want to give us what we want? I've got some money right here. Jeez.
Number 1. Alien Isolation, 2014. PC, PS3 and 4, Switch, Xbox 360, and Xbox One. In 2006, Sega acquired the rights to develop and publish games based on the Alien franchise. One of the results of this acquisition sits right at the bottom of our list, so it seems only fitting to bookend the video with another one. In a somewhat surprising move, Sega got British studio Creative Assembly involved when it came to the development of Alien Isolation, despite them being most well known for their work on the very un-sci-fi Total War series. Still, with the help of some external hires and a strong can-do attitude, Creative Assembly ended up creating probably the most esteemed digital Alien experience of all time.
Perhaps Alien Isolation's greatest achievement is the way it successfully recaptures what Alien, the movie that started it all, is all about. We've already discussed how the video game adaptations tend to reduce the deadly xenomorphs to mere cannon fodder, and many of the best games on this list are guilty of just that, but Alien Isolation reignites the terror that these things embody. Protagonist Amanda Ripley, the daughter of Ellen Ripley from the movies, spends the vast majority of the game terrifyingly close to a gory demise, incapable of fighting back against the extreme killing machine that stalks her, and only able to hide from its menacing presence and simply pray that it goes away.
It's in capturing the horror of the first Alien film and in recreating the blocky retro tech of the 70s masterpiece that Alien Isolation's triumph truly lies. The production values are top-notch, the voice acting is fantastic, and the campaign provides the most legitimate Alien experience possible outside of the real thing.
Alien Isolation isn't perfect. Gameplay and progression have a tendency to fall into trial and error from time to time, with the runtime feeling a little stretched here and there, and the aliens' initially panic-inducing AI can be worked out and even manipulated with enough observation. But if you put this game on in a darkened room and are prepared to totally immerse yourself in the game's world, you'd be very hard-pressed to find a more authentic-feeling movie tie-in in all of gaming. And for that, Alien Isolation deserves to take the top spot.
Right, that's our list, and I can tell you it's been quite the harrowing experience wading through the gore and alien goo of 2 entire franchises. We've worked really hard on this one, and honestly, I think we deserve a big hug. No, not like that!